This hearing will come to order. This hearing is virtual and we must address a few housekeeping matters. For today's meeting, the chair or the staff designated by the chair may mute the participants' microphones when they are not under recognition for the purpose of eliminating background noise. Members, you are responsible for muting and unmuting yourself. If I notice that you have not unmuted yourself, I will ask the staff to send you a request to unmute yourself. Please accept that so that we can unmute you. I remind members and witnesses that the five-minute clock still applies. If there's a technology issue, and we've had our share today already, I will move to the next member until the issue is resolved, and you will retain the balance of your time, members. If you notice the clock on your screen, it will show how much time left is remaining. 1 minute remaining, the clock will turn yellow. At 30 seconds remaining, I will gently tap the gavel to remind members that their time is almost expired. When your time has expired, the clock will turn red, and I will begin to recognize the next member. In terms of speaking order, we're going to follow the order set in House rules, beginning with the chair and ranking member. Members present at the time the hearing is called to order will be recognized in order of seniority. And finally, members not present at the time of the hearing will be recognized in the order in which they appear. Finally, House rules require me to remind you that we have set up an email address to which members can send anything they wish to submit in writing to any of our hearings or markups. This email address has been provided to you in advance with your staff. So I'm going to bring the subcommittee on defense. We'll all come to order. This morning, the subcommittee will receive testimony on the posture of the National Guard and Reserve components for fiscal year 2023 budget. Today, we recognize the Chief of the National Guard Bureau and Reserve component chiefs from Army, Navy, and Marine Corps and Air Force Reserves. This subcommittee provides funding for the National Guard and Reserves, personnel costs, operations, maintenance costs, and equipment, including funding for the National Guard Reserve Equipment Account. This appropriation is not included in the President's request. This funding also provides for activities such as counter-drug operations, helicopters, fixed-wing aircraft, Humvee modernization, and much more. The subcommittee has taken a particular interest in the Humvee modernization, especially considering the several incidents of vehicle rollovers within the Army in recent years. We'd like to get an update from you about your modernization efforts. It's also vitally important that you are providing a high level of quality care for our soldiers. Incidents of extremism, harassment, and sexual harassment are all too common amongst the ranks, and your continued leadership is critical to addressing these acts and reversing these trends. We'd also like to receive your input on the current pace of operations. Our National Guard forces are called upon to support a variety of missions, including humanitarian missions, acts of civil unrest, and the continued COVID response, support to the southwest border, and overseas operations, including partner with and training Ukrainian forces. We are interested in the continued high tempo of this duty, how it's affecting our troops, their morale, their readiness, and retention efforts. Please know that each member on this subcommittee appreciates your tireless effort and the service of those who serve under your leadership. And with that, I'd like to recognize the distinguished ranking member, Mr. Calvert, for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Chair McCollum. Happy that we were able to proceed with the hearing today. I would also like to welcome General Hokeson to this subcommittee. Over the past year, we've seen our nation continue to rely on the National Guard at an increased tempo. COVID-19, the crisis at the southern border, natural disasters, all placed a demand on our guardsmen that this subcommittee recognizes and is grateful for. In addition to its domestic responsibilities, I want to highlight the Guard's impact on America's role in the world, specifically the State Partnership Program, which we also fund. As I've mentioned before, I'm extremely proud that the California National Guard has been training alongside the Ukrainian forces for several years now. When conflict was on the horizon, the Adjutant General of the California Guard was one of the first phone calls made by the Ukrainian military. The success and determination of the Ukrainians during this conflict come in part due to this relationship and investments that we have made in the National Guard and the State Partnership Program. It's important that we consider future investments. We look at the crisis in Ukraine to see what lessons we have learned. Robust funding and expansion of the state partnership program is something I look forward to working with the chair on, both in the FY23 bill and beyond. As our adversaries around the globe continue to threaten the rules-based order that we have led since World War II, it's vital that our interest that America remains the security partner of choice. General Hokuson, in addition to hearing about the demands on our Guard, I'm also interested in hearing about how we can increase recruitment and retention, improve quality of life issues, and ensure that our Guard is appropriately modernized. I share the concerns of many of my colleagues that the Guard has not been properly prioritized in its history. You have my strong commitment that this subcommittee will continue to ensure that the Guard is not a second-tier force, but instead remains an integral part of our national defense strategy. I want to conclude by thanking you for your service, and I look forward to your testimony. With that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you so much, Mr. Calvert. I would like to welcome our first witness, Daniel Hoekstrom of the Chief National Guard Bureau, a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. General, welcome. This is your second time testifying on the record, and members have full copies of your statement. And so I would really encourage you to summarize your statement and to be complete and succinct as you can be when asked questions. General, would you please proceed?
Yes, Chair McCollum, Ranking Member Calvert, and esteemed members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify and share the story of today's National Guard. When you think of the National Guard, some might think of the way we used to be viewed as a part-time force serving 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks in the summer, often referred to as weekend warriors who cleaned up after disasters. Unfortunately, our combat capabilities weren't always part of the conversation or even understood. But as we all know, after September 11, 2001, that all changed. And in the 2 decades since, and especially over the past 2 years, when we responded to COVID, civil disturbances, and disasters while meeting every overseas deployment, the National Guard really transformed. Our purpose and our mission are no longer strategic, they are operational because of our experience in combat and the congressional investment in our personnel, training, and equipment. Today's National Guard is stronger, more capable, and more effective than ever before. We have become an operational reserve and integral to the joint force. Part of it is our size. We're the second largest force in the Department of Defense enterprise, behind only the United States Army. We make up 20% of the joint force. 1 in every 5 service members is a National Guardsman. But more than that, it's our combat experience honed over 2 decades of conflict that provides our nation the increased capability and capacity it needs. As an example, last year as our mission in Afghanistan came to an end, the last fighter aircraft to leave Afghanistan was a New Jersey National Guard F-16. Soldiers with the Minnesota Army National Guard were on the ground at Hamid Karzai International Airport, as were Air National Guard teams of F-16s providing air cover for the evacuations. Air Guard C-17s were there to transport American citizens and Afghan refugees. Air National Guard KC-135 Stratotankers were refueling the airlift, and pilotless Air National Guard MQ-9 Reapers were monitoring conditions on the ground. More recently, I received a message from the CENTCOM commander, General Eric Kurilla, after he visited an Avenger air defense site on Al-Assad Air Base in Iraq, where he met members of the Ohio Army National Guard who shot down a one-way attack UAV just 3 days before his visit. He also visited northern Syria, where he met an infantry platoon of Ladley fighting vehicles from the Montana National Guard. In January, they used their Bradleys during intense fighting following an ISIS prison break. Every gunner in that platoon is a school-trained master gunner, and the battalion commander called them, quote, the best Bradley company he has ever observed. This is today's National Guard. We exist to fight and win our nation's wars, and the Joint Force cannot do so without us. It's the mission that drives our manning, training, and equipment needs and makes possible our ability to respond to almost anything here at home. Today, these needs are evolving. For the first time in history, we simultaneously have 2 nuclear-capable strategic competitors in China and Russia. We cannot predict when or where the next conflict will be or what our competitors are bringing to bear. So we must ensure our personnel are ready and our equipment and training and processes are modernized. We have to be ready to fight and to win. We must also continue to strengthen ties with our allies and partners who provide an unmatched strategic advantage. Through the State Partnership Program, our state National Guards are partnered with 93 countries, 45% of the world's nations. And in coordination with our combatant commanders in the State Department, we're looking to grow another 30 partnerships in the next decade. The benefits of this program cannot be overemphasized, but are readily apparent in the partnership between the California National Guard and Ukraine. Their partnership began in 1993. Since then, they've conducted more than 1,000 training events together. While the rest of the world underestimated the Ukrainian Armed Forces' abilities, the National Guard was not surprised because we've been training with them for more than 29 years. In fact, National Guardsmen were some of the last Americans to leave Ukraine. 165 members of the Florida National Guard were deployed to the Joint Multinational Training Group Ukraine mission to help Ukrainian forces enhance their capabilities. And today, they are training their Ukrainian partners in Germany. When Russia began its unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, Ukraine's military leaders reached out to people they trusted, people they had known for years, and those were members of the California National Guard. The Ukrainians' first text messages were, "We're being invaded." Their second messages said, "Here's what we need." I hope to work with Congress to provide predictable and consistent funding for the State Partnership Program. It's an important, cost-effective program that makes us stronger and helps our nation's military make sure our nation's military has trusted, capable, and interoperable partners at our side. Today's National Guard would not be possible without your investments over the past 20 years. For us to maintain the capability and capacity we provide our nation, National Guard force structure and equipment must be included in future modernization efforts so we can continue to provide strategic depth and deterrence for our nation. I'm proud to represent today's National Guard, a force that is ready to fight our nation's wars, ready to serve our communities in their time of need, and ready to work with our partners at every level, from local to international. Throughout our evolution of the past 20 years, the National Guard has been and will always remain always ready, always there. Thank you for your time. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. And a great story on Minnesota Public Radio. So I'm assuming it was also part of National Public Radio on the Guard, mentioning my ranking member's favorite state, California. So thank you very much for your testimony. Next, we'll receive a testimony from Lieutenant General Jody Daniels, Chief of the Army Reserve.
Chairwoman McCollum, Ranking Member Calvert, distinguished members of the committee, on behalf of the 200,000 soldiers and civilian employees of America's Army Reserve, thank you for this opportunity to testify before you today, and for your continued support to our soldiers, families, and their employers. Ladies and gentlemen, the Army Reserve continues to provide the Army and the Homeland with critical enabling capabilities, including over half of the total Army's quartermaster, medical, transportation, and civil affairs force structure. These Army Reserve capabilities and others, such as intelligence, chemical, and engineer, enable America's Army to fight and win our nation's wars as a member of the Joint Force. To date, the Army Reserve has provided over 4,000 medical professionals, logisticians, engineers, and other enablers to provide relief to our civilian counterparts during this continuing global pandemic. In support of the Afghan evacuation, we quickly mobilized Army Reserve soldiers for Operations Allies Rescue in Afghanistan and Operation Allies Welcome here at home. In Afghanistan, the 936th Forward Resuscitative Surgical Detachment provided emergency care to military and civilian patients wounded in the Hamid Karzai International Airport suicide bombing. Here at home, my Army Garrison Commander at Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, quickly transformed an Army Reserve installation into temporary housing and relocation facilities to support over 12,000 Afghan guests. Over 1,000 Army Reservists were activated to backfill the active component personnel at multiple OAW locations, and 44 remain on duty today. Your Army Reserve also continues to provide critical capabilities in response to national disasters in the homeland alongside our teammates in the National Guard. In addition to our support to wildland fire and hurricane response through our emergency preparedness liaison officers, 45 Army Reserve soldiers from the 361st Multi-Role Bridge Company stationed in Georgia conducted emergency bridging operations in Louisiana, which allowed for a supply and evacuation corridor to assist communities impacted by Hurricane Ida. The Army Reserve continues to support every geographic combatant command. Since March 1st, 2021, we have mobilized almost 18,000 soldiers in 268 units to support operations around the globe. Although the Army Reserve accounts for just 20% of Army personnel, we maintain approximately half of the Army's enabling forces and a quarter of its force mobilization capacity at only 6% of the total Army budget. While the Army Reserve maintains its readiness, we are also shaping tomorrow by bringing innovation and depth to Army modernization efforts. Through the 75th Innovation Command, the Army Reserve continues to support Army Futures Command with its link to unique private sector expertise. This diverse talent pipeline was instrumental in the formation and development of the Army Software Factory. Yet mobilization and readiness are nothing without people. Ready and resilient soldiers, capable leaders, cohesive teams, strong families, and supportive employers are the key to a ready and capable Army Reserve. We are aggressively addressing harmful behaviors that threaten to undermine our ability to build cohesive, fit, and disciplined teams. We are building resilient soldiers through tough, realistic training done safely. Sustaining our critical capabilities requires talent development at all levels. To this end, we are hyper-focused on the growth and retention of mid-career officers and NCOs that are the backbone of a ready force. We must also ensure that our senior leaders have robust joint experiences, which is why I support the reinstatement of exemptions for the 18 Chairman's Reserve positions. Many times these personnel bring a unique set of qualifications from their full-time duties in their civilian capacities. These positions are vital to a seamless integration of active duty officers along with reservists who gain invaluable joint experience. Sustaining our essential enabling capabilities also requires consistent, adequate, and predictable funding to ensure the Army Reserve meets the needs of the Army combatant commands and the homeland. We are grateful for consistent appropriations that positively impact Army Reserve readiness and modernization efforts, including the ongoing support of the National Guard and Reserve Equipping Account. We are deeply appreciative of the additional MILCON funding you provided, which will allow us to replace some of our World War II era wooden barracks with modern facilities at Fort McCoy. Also, I'd like to thank the committee for the additional funds which will help us get after critical facility repairs. The future holds many challenges, but today's Army Reserve strives every day to be the most ready Army Reserve in our nation's history. With your continued support, we will leverage our essential enabling capabilities to meet the needs of the nation and shape the Army Reserve for the future of warfare. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you. And I and some of the staff went out to Fort McCoy, and it was a cold, snowy, gray, Old North Day, and the hearts were warm, both the people in uniform serving, the community, and the Afghanis. So congratulations on short notice for such a great job to everyone involved. We'll now hear from Vice Admiral John Mustin, the Chief of Navy Reserve.
Good afternoon, Chair McCollum, Ranking Member Calvert, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. It's my distinct honor to report to you on the status and the vision of America's Navy Reserve. First, I'd like to recognize my wife, Kim, whose steadfast support throughout my 3-decade Navy career exemplifies the unsung sacrifices and service typical of our military spouses. I'd also like to express my gratitude to Navy Reserve Force Master Chief Tracy Hunt, my partner and confidant, who tirelessly represents and advocates for our enlisted reserve sailors every day. And I'm honored to speak to you today alongside my peer reserve chiefs, with whom I've experienced great camaraderie, alignment, and collaboration. Finally, I would like to recognize our 97,000 reserve sailors, our nearly 450 dedicated civilians, the families who support them, and the thousands of employers who value and enable the service of our citizen sailors worldwide. They are all stakeholders in the success of our Navy Reserve. Today's security environment is increasingly competitive, faster paced, and far more complex than historical norms. The reemergence of long-term strategic competition and accelerating advancements in technology require the Navy Reserve Force to adapt to deliver the personnel, platforms, and operational capability necessary when called upon. For over a century, the Navy Reserve has reliably delivered strategic depth and critical operational capabilities to our active Navy and Joint Force in peace and war. Recently, nearly 9,000 Navy Reserve sailors responded to the coronavirus 19 pandemic. And earlier this year, we surged hundreds of sailors to support the evolving security crisis in Europe. These activations highlight the flexibility, readiness, and value our citizen sailors bring to the fight. And yet their significant contribution merely hints at the demands expected of the Navy Reserve in a future great power maritime conflict. The Navy Reserve is rapidly transforming to deliver at a favorable resource-informed cost, a peerless force, designed, trained, and ready to fight confidently and boldly in sustained multi-domain high-end warfare. To that end, the singular priority of our Navy Reserve is simple: warfighting readiness. Modernizing reserve equipment, training systems, and mobilization processes is critical to delivering that readiness. To ensure our sailors are ready to serve on day one of any conflict, the reserve force must maintain parity with our active counterparts by operating relevant modern equipment. To this end, procurement of the more reliable and capable KC-130 Juliet aircraft to replace our legacy C-130 airframes remains the Navy Reserve's #1 equipment priority. Last year, Navy Reserve Fleet Logistics Squadrons flew 26,000 hours and moved 24 million pounds of cargo for the Navy and the Department of Defense at a cost avoidance of $1 billion. However, with an average age exceeding 3 decades, the current C-130 fleet is challenged to maintain sustained fleet logistics requirements. Modern KC-130 Juliets can do more and will realize an additional $200 million in annual transportation cost savings to the Navy. Additionally, we are defining and documenting comprehensive education and credentialing requirements for each mobilization billet, ensuring every sailor is fully trained for their assigned duties in conflict. We're reimagining access to training for our widely distributed force. Concurrently, we are implementing policies and processes, placing the right sailors in the right billets at the right time, and continuously and accurately assessing and reporting their warfighting readiness. In concert with these efforts, our adaptive mobilization process, demonstrated in practice and refined in ongoing series of large-scale exercises, will leverage the Navy Reserve's nationally distributed infrastructure to locally mobilize reserve sailors rapidly and at scale. In a high-end conflict, these efforts will enable the Navy to activate 50,000 sailors in 30 days. Our talented, patriotic reserve sailors are central and vital to our enduring warfighting advantage. The Navy Reserve is committed to a culture of excellence based on our Navy's core values: honor, courage, and commitment. Further, we're dedicated to eliminating destructive behaviors, ensuring sailor wellness, and fostering a diverse, inclusive culture to enhance and retain our asymmetric advantage. As always, I am grateful for the committee's support of the Navy Reserve. Our efforts are made possible by the timely delivery of a fiscal year 23 appropriations bill to provide predictability to our sailors, their families, their employers, and most importantly, to our global combatant commanders. In closing, I remain humbled every day by the commitment and contribution of our citizen sailors, the civilians that support them, and the supporting families that are collectively your Navy Reserve. They serve our nation with distinction every day in every theater around the globe, 24/7, 365. They are the sentinels of our security. I thank you for your support and attention, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll hear from Lieutenant General David Belton, Commander of the Marine Corps Reserve.
Chair McCollum, Ranking Member Calvert, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today and to testify on behalf of the Commandant of the Marine Corps about your Marine Corps Reserve. I'm honored to appear with my fellow Reserve Component Service Chiefs and my senior enlisted leader, 4th Sergeant Major Carlos Ruiz, who's sitting over my left shoulder, who joins me today from Brazil, where we are working with 21 different nations, Marine Corps from around the globe to mitigate global threats. As the Commandant stated before this committee last week, the Marine Corps continues to be our nation's 911 force in readiness. Since its founding in 1916, the Marine Corps Reserve has continued a legacy of answering the nation's call with relevant, ready, and responsive forces as part of a vital commitment the Marine Corps has to total force construct. On average, every year, approximately 1/3 of my force activates for exercises or in global support of combatant commands. Here at home, the Marine Corps Reserve activated and deployed over 1,000 Marines on short notice this year to provide substantial support to Operations Allied Welcome and our Afghan partners. As the Marine Corps' approach to global threats continue to evolve, so must your Marine Corps Reserve. And this means not only having the right capabilities, but also gaining the right access to our warfighters at the speed of relevance to meet future demands in an increasingly complex global landscape. Our 3-year effort under Force Design 2030, punctuated by the ongoing crisis in Ukraine, has led us to consider whether the current models for authorities and resource funding will allow us to generate, access, and deploy Marine Corps reservists that will be required by a growing global threat. With the current lack of overseas contingency operations funding, our ability to respond at the speed of relevance in future contingencies and scenarios seems greatly reduced. I would like to work with this committee to explore a new, more modern set of authorities and oversights and fundings that would enable and empower your Marine Corps Reserve to continue responding to crisis globally and to contingencies with increased flexibility. As you are aware, a vitally important component of Force Design 2030 is the Marine Corps strategy for talent management. As part of this evolving strategy, the Marine Corps must continue to leverage the reserve component to recruit, retain, and promote diverse warriors who possess unique skills and perspectives. The Marine Corps' talent management efforts will greatly enhance skill development, diversity, leadership, inclusion, and equity throughout the reserve component. We will continue to develop innovative policies, pathways, and tools designed to capture, catalog, and maintain visibility of our diverse pool of talent and ensure Marines have a path for future service. I am continually inspired by the professionalism, competence, and dedication of our Reserve Marines. Reserve Marines work extraordinarily hard to balance family responsibilities, civilian careers, and education with their military service. They introduce different perspectives to the Marine Corps based on their wide range of backgrounds and experiences. They have chosen to continue to serve honorably, even though many of them have long since fulfilled their initial obligation to the Corps. On a daily basis, they demonstrate extraordinary selflessness and continue to answer their irrational call to serve. I want to thank the committee for our continued support of the National Guard and Reserve equipment appropriation. As I have testified the last 2 years, I would request your ongoing support for my effort to use NAGRIA funds for individual combat clothing and equipment for our Marines. I would also ask for your assistance in exploring opportunities to enhance the Marine Corps' overall littoral maneuver and sustainment capabilities by building this capacity within the Marine Corps Reserve. By increasing the flexibility of NAGRIA, Congress can help protect our warfighters and prevent strategic risk to mission by ensuring your Reserve Marines remain at peak operational readiness. In closing, I want to extend my gratitude for your ongoing efforts to provide timely appropriations each year. This has a direct impact on your Reserve Marines and sailors and their limited number of training days. Your continued support to help and ensure Marine Corps Reserve will have a predictable and uninterrupted training schedules to maximize personnel, material, and training readiness. I look forward to this opportunity to be here today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Last but not least, we're going to hear from Lieutenant General Richard Scobie, Chief of the Air Force Reserve, and this is his last time to testify before the committee. And maybe you'll share the exciting news with the committee during the hearing, if you have an opportunity to, about what you and your family will be doing next. Sir, you're up.
Chair McCollum, Ranking Member Calvert, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. It's an honor for me and my command chief, Chief Master Sergeant Tim White, to be here today on behalf of the men and women of the Air Force Reserve. I'm continually amazed at the accomplishment of our Reserve citizen airmen as they met every challenge put before them over this past year. The Air Force Reserve provides strategic depth with rapid surge capability across every Air Force Corps mission set. Because we are a predominantly part-time force, we provide ready forces and an exceptional value to the American taxpayer. We are accessible as a force, as evidenced by our daily contributions to the global joint force operations, and we are committed to attracting top talent by fostering a culture of inclusion in which every American and every airman can serve to their fullest potential. Over the past year, we have once again proved our ability to rapidly surge and provide capacity on demand. Within 24 hours of notification, Reserve Airmen answered the call to help evacuate our most vulnerable allies from Afghanistan. At the same time, we also surged 500 airmen to support Afghan evacuees here in the United States. Within 3 weeks, Reserve Airmen worked with our interagency partners to provide for the basic needs of over 11,000 evacuees as part of operations allies welcome. With appropriations from this committee, we increased our organizational effectiveness and enhanced our ability to provide excellent care for our citizen airmen and their families. Likewise, we are grateful to Congress for the continued direct hiring authority. Last year, thanks in part to this authority, we achieved a 10-year high in our Air Reserve technician staffing. Our requested fiscal year 23 budget will ensure the Air Force Reserve meets the priorities laid out in the National Defense Strategy to succeed against facing threats. We remain in lockstep with the Secretary of the Air Force's operational imperatives, as well as the Chief of Staff's vision to accelerate change or lose. We request resources from Congress which ready our force to defend our nation. The Reserve Personnel Appropriations and Operation and Maintenance Funds drives our readiness. These accounts fund our training, our flying hours, our mobilization requirements, our equipment maintenance, and our salaries. We are particularly grateful for the additional funding in the fiscal year 22 omnibus to offset increased fuel prices and our facility sustainment, repair, and modernization projects. Your continuing support enables steady progress towards readiness for the Air Force Reserve. Achieving total force readiness requires total force investment in both personnel and equipment. We accomplish equipment parity through the National Guard and Reserve equipment appropriation. INGREA enables us to modernize gear, sustain our capability, and replace obsolete equipment when recapitalization by the active component is not feasible. Parity is critical to seamless total force integration across the joint force, encountering those pacing threats outlined in the National Defense Strategy. We remain grateful for these appropriations and cannot overemphasize how vital they are to our readiness. I appreciate your support for INGREA now and in the future. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today and for your steadfast support as we ensure the Air Force Reserve is prepared to defend our great nation. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. With that, we'll move on to member questions. Remember, they're going to put things up in the chat. It's myself, Mr. Calvert, Mr. Rustenberger, Mr. Cole are the first four up. The rest will be in the chat. And in about 18 minutes, I will be transferring the gavel over to the Vice Chair, Mr. Rustenberger. And sir, they've sent you a list of who's next. I would like to, just a couple of things that we want to thank all the work that's gone into Ukraine. So General Hoekstra, we know that the Guard's going to be training again. It was on the news. Can you maybe tell us some of the actions that the Guard's going to be taking? Because we've got the continued hostilities in Ukraine. How do you see the program transforming or changing at all?
Chair McComb, thank you for the question. So when we look at the Ukraine specifically, and part of the EUCOM AOR, we've got 24 partnerships in EUCOM, and obviously California and Ukraine have been partners since 1993, as I mentioned earlier, and it conducted over 1,000 training events together. Also, after Russia came into Crimea in 2014, we actually stood up like very similar to our national training center in the Lviv area. And since 2016, National Guard trainers have been training the Ukrainian army there. And as I mentioned earlier, their ability to defend their nation is obviously very reliant upon the fact that it's their willingness to do so. But I think a lot of the training that we conducted with them when it comes to command and control, logistics, small unit tactics, development of non-commissioned officers, we're really seeing the result of that on the battlefield today in Ukraine. And so right before hostilities started, we pulled our trainers, 165 from the Florida Guard, out of Ukraine, and they relocated to Germany. And they have been training now the Ukrainian armed forces on a lot of the newer equipment that the U.S. is providing, primarily the M777 artillery, 155 millimeter artillery, the M113 armored personnel carriers, as well as the Q-36 radars. And they will continue to train them until the next Guard unit comes in behind them to continue that level of training. In addition, we're working very closely with all of our other state partners in the EUCOM AOR, and very shortly I'll be out there to visit them. And really, when you look at Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Romania, Bulgaria, a lot of those other state partners. Many of them, in fact, 13 of them are providing assistance to Ukraine. And so it has shown the value of the investment that our nation has made for almost 30 years in the state partnership program and working together, developing those partnerships, and then working together for the greater good.
Well, we look forward to anything that you see, as I asked in my question, anything forthcoming with either training for the Guard, equipment, anything that you might be needing, as well as integrating some of those other National Guards, those other countries into working together with one another. We had the pleasure of meeting some of the, it was Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia, where they all have different missions, but they're all working to support one another. I'm, for the record, going to be submitting some questions on Nagria, which the 22 conference report included $950 million, which was consistent with the previous year. And I'm going to be asking the Guard and Reserve how it matched up with the priorities that you had given, on where you're still short on it, and how the supplemental budget, especially for the Guard right now, but the supplemental in general for the mission in Ukraine is moving forward. And then I'm also going to be submitting for the record a question on facilities maintenance. As was pointed out by Lieutenant General Daniels, they made it warm and cozy, but Fort McCoy is not up to date in shelter that we would normally expect, but they make it work. They always do. The Guard knows how to make things work. But I would like a little more information on how you were able to utilize the facility statement repair and modernization funds in the 2020 Appropriations Act. Knowing that we didn't get that done on time, we're trying to get this bill done on time. The House of Representatives is working on it. So I would like to know kind of the age of your facilities and how that's going. Some of that can be done in DOD money, some of it gets done in MILCON. And I would like to have a big list so that Mr. Calvert and I can sit down and talk to our counterparts in MILCON about what we can do in the future to help you. So will those be submitted for the record. Mr. Calvert, turn to you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. On the state partnership program, obviously, it's been a tremendous success, and Taiwan now is obviously an issue. It's in the news. Section 1249 of fiscal year 2022 National Defense Authorization Act requires the Secretary of Defense to consider the feasibility, the advisability of enhanced cooperation between the National Guard and Taiwan, perhaps similar to how the state partnership program functions in general. I understand that the Secretary of Defense is still evaluating the operational concept. General Hokanson, how do you envision the cooperation functioning, and what funding requirements will you need in FY23 to get this going? I would like to get this going sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Member Calvert. Thank you for that question. And so when you look at the relationship between the National Guard and Taiwan, both actually the Hawaii National Guard, Michigan, and Minnesota have enduring relationships with Taiwan. We work very closely with Indo-PACOM and the State Department to look at what capabilities the National Guard might be able to provide. And in October of last year, I actually met with the Chief of Staff of the Taiwanese Army to discuss their reserve component and what their goals were for that force. And so when we look at the options that we can provide Taiwan, we're working closely to stay in sync with Indo-PACOM as well as the State Department, but we're looking at what possibly we could do to help them. And then, of course, the resources, depending on what we're authorized to do, will be directly correlated to that. When we look at options, obviously there's a state partnership program, but we also have a relationship with Israel where we have multiple states that help with specific capabilities that country would like to share or learn about. And so that might be an even other option that we look at Taiwan. But as I've relayed to Admiral Aquilino, the Indo-PACOM commander, is the National Guard is here and our foot is on the gas. We're not slowing anything down. And if there's any way we can help, we will gladly do that as quickly as possible.
Well, since you brought up the, force multiplication, I would hope that the Japanese certainly would be helping the Taiwanese, and which probably would get under the skin of the Chinese even more. And the Australians and New Zealand, is there any movement in that direction?
So for the specific to the National Guard, we have 13 partnerships in the Indo-PACOM area of responsibility, and actually 6 of those share borders with China. And so for us, we work very closely with Indo-PACOM and all the other allies and partners in the region to ensure everything we do is supportive of their theater security cooperation plans. Because whatever we do, we want to make sure that everything we do is integrated and supports the overall U.S. effort.
Okay, good. Quick question for General Scooby. Obviously, as we move toward Asia, we have long distances, and tankers are going to be very important. And obviously, I'm pleased that the KC-46 is coming to March Air Force Base in California. And we've discussed the amazing contribution that March has to reserves, General Scooby. And can you provide an update on the final selection and bed down process for this basing action?
Ranking Member Calvert, thank you very much. So as we get towards our final solution with the KC-46 at March, we're pretty excited about getting that capability there on the West Coast. I'd have to say, that is the one thing that makes our Air Force so successful, is the ability to project power. And the only way you can do that is with a robust air refueling capability. And that's what this is going to give us. Moving into KC-46 to March in particular, it gives us the ability to get jets on the West Coast, which puts them in better alignment with what is going on in Indo-PACOM right now. So I would say the first thing that's going to happen is in June of this year, we'll finish up our basing strategy for March and determine exactly what the bed down is going to look like. And in fiscal year second quarter of 25 is when the first KC-46s will be starting to show up at March. And we'll try to do it heel to toe with the KC-135s that are there that'll be replaced. But we have a divestment plan for those as we start to bring on the KC-46. And with the Air Force's help, we were able to bring those earlier in the FIDEP in order to get those fielded to March. So pretty excited about that.
Any assistance you need in as far as MILCON or other funds, please let me know. With that, I'll yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Rusenberger, then it'd be Mr. Cole, Mr. Kilmer.
Good, thank you. General Huckinson, and I want to thank you all for being here today and the work that you do for our country. General, there's a total of 4 Air National Guard units that still fly the A-10, and one of them is in my district. The 175th Wing is stationed at Warfield Air National Guard Base in Middle River. And I think it's necessary that I highlight the importance of renovating the Martin State Airport runway to ensure that we maintain future missions after the A-10 is fully divested. Several of the A-10s are deployed to Europe from my district as we speak. Can you speak to the importance of the runway renovation project at Martin State Airport in Middle River to the National Guard? And I have one follow-up question about cyber.
Yes, sir. So when we look at the whole portfolio in the Air National Guard, we have 25 fighter squadrons. And I think it's absolutely critical that we retain all 25 because of the capability and capacity that our nation needs. And of course, Martin State is part of this. And when we look at some of our older airframes like the A-10, the F-15 CDs, and the pre-block F-16s, I think it's very important that we have a plan to retain those squadrons within the Air National Guard. And with any of these, as we modernize airframes, we're going to have to make adjustments to the existing facilities. So in the case of Martin State, of course, we think it's important to make all those adjustments so that we can retain those squadrons in the Air National Guard, because that's what our Air Force and our nation needs.
Okay, thank you for that. Also, the 175th Cyber Operations Group is dual mission. Wait a minute, I hear background noise. Okay. The 175th Cyber Operations Group is dual mission with the A-10 Thunderbolt aircraft at Warfield. Maintaining cyberspace plays a dominant and important role in national security. General, can you share with the subcommittee how you plan to recruit cyber professionals when the demand in the private sector continues to have such an advantage over the military? What challenges exist and what do you suggest to do in this subject area?
Sir, you highlight a great point. And when you look at the investment the Department of Defense makes in training our cyber professionals, there is a significant draw for them when their service obligation ends in the active component to seek employment in the civilian employer environment. So in one aspect of that, we work very closely with the active component to identify those cyber warriors that are leaving the active component and link them up with a National Guard cyber unit in the area that they may be seeking civilian employment. In addition, we look at those areas that have a strong IT or cyber business environment and really look at opportunities to recruit folks to do that, because many of them find a lot of satisfaction not only in serving their country, but getting to do some of those things that they may not be able to do in their civilian capacity that they could do on the military side. And we're also looking to make sure that we have the right bonus structure set in place to retain those folks and also to recruit them to what they do. Because in many cases, the experience that they bring from their civilian employer is significantly helpful to what they're doing on the military side. So anything and everything we can do to leverage their civilian skills, but then also capture those departing the active component so we retain their experience in the Department of Defense is really important to us.
Yeah, okay, and what plans do you have for improving the program to make sure that the state partnership program is of great importance to many members of our subcommittee?
Well, sir, one of the big things that we could really use our help on is we did really a great amount of funding, which we can execute 100%. Unfortunately, when we have continuing resolutions or a delay, sometimes we don't get that money until later in the year. And because we get it later in the year, our fiscal year ends on September 30th. Sometimes that window is so short that our partner nations can't adjust accordingly. And unfortunately, we have to return that money. Whereas if we had the flexibility to go, in some cases, beyond the fiscal year, it would allow us to plan with them and utilize the full intent of what you intended that money to be utilized for.
Well, I know it's important. We need to work with you on that, and that is an issue we're going to be dealing with. I yield back.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Before I yield to Mr. Cole, I want to just thank everyone for their testimony here today, the follow-up that will be occurring with the staff as we put the budget together. And with that, as I yield to Mr. Cole, I give the gavel to Mr. Ruthensberger. Thank you for helping out, Mr. Ruthensberger. Mr. Cole.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. As usual, Mr. Ruthensberger has anticipated my question on the very popular and very effective state partnership program, because I have exactly the same concerns that General Hokanson outlined for us. And we don't get our work done on time, and then we give you money and you don't have the ability to execute the mission, even when we've given you the resources. So just for what it's worth, count me as very much in favor of providing you with the flexibility to be able to keep those funds and deploy them as you see fit. I don't think there's anybody on the subcommittee that has any question about the value of this program and how effectively those dollars have been used. We shouldn't let our own dysfunction from time to time keep you from executing your mission. But since Dutch already covered that, or I should say chairman now, let me move to another area. Last year, General, in your testimony, you talked a lot about the importance of healthcare parity between the services. And I'd like you to elaborate a little bit on that and give us the things that are most important. I do remember at Fort Sill in my district years ago when Iraqi Freedom was being executed and General Mike Maples was the commander down there. I went down and I said, what's your number one problem as all these units are coming through here? And he looked at me and he said, teeth. And I said, what do you mean teeth? And he said, a lot of these guys are showing up and they don't have good dental care. And, we got to take care of that problem. We can't send them off to combat with that. And it's really delaying our ability to deploy these soldiers. So it really began to hit home to me how important this was in maintaining a ready force. So I'd like you to tell the subcommittee what we need to do to give you that ability.
Yes, sir. And you really touched on one of my highest priorities. And obviously with all of us, we couldn't do anything without our people. And when we look at what we've asked them to do, not only over the last 20 years, as you've highlighted, but also in the last 2 years related to COVID, asking them to literally leave their civilian career and immediately step into an environment we were really unfamiliar with. We weren't really sure what we were getting into. But when we do that, we want to make sure that all of our personnel are medically ready. And in order to do that, we've got to ensure that they've got medical care. And when you go back to when a soldier or airman comes into the National Guard, they make a significant commitment on their part, the investment in time and effort to go through training. And then our nation makes a significant investment in the resources we put to train them, not only through basic training, but their advanced skills prior to getting into their unit. And so for me, we want to really protect that investment so that when our guardsmen are needed, they are medically ready and there's nothing preventing them or really delaying them from getting the medical care that they need. And so any way that we can do that to improve that process or make sure that every single guardsman and reserve soldier, airman, sailor, and Marine has access to medical care, it will just make sure our medical readiness is that much better. And it's not just the medical readiness. When we also look at some of the mental health issues, it would give them access to care as well. And, we're not sure how big of an input that would have, but we think anything and everything we can do to provide that care might alleviate some of the concerns that we find out later.
Let me switch to, well, again, I'm very supportive of that. And I think this is a resource question. I don't think there's an argument about the merits of doing this. It just gets down to how much money we have in the end. And of course, we don't know that at this stage in the game. Let me ask you about one other area, if I may. On Thursday of last week, your vice came by and we had a good talk about some of the needs in terms of maintaining communications ability and cybersecurity and some of the things the Guard might need in that respect going forward. And I think we all know the potentials. Nobody knows more than Dutch Ruppersberger about cyber and the disruptions that can happen. And if we were to lose GPS or something like that and not have any backup capability, we'd be in a world of hurt. So as you wrestle with that problem, what is it that the Guard is proposing and suggesting that we take a look at? And how long a period do you think it would take us to actually get a system like that up and running?
Yes, sir. And so when we look at that, when we look at the non-federalized mission of the National Guard, something that's really important to that is our critical infrastructure. And as you highlight, the key is when we talk about precision navigation and timing, which is primarily through GPS signals, if we have a backup or an alternate system that can potentially fall into place if that is ever compromised, it would ensure that really our first responders still have that capability to communicate and get to where they need to go, and also would help many of our critical infrastructure maintain their abilities. And so when we look at that, we've currently set up 3 of those locations. There's a plan over the next 3 to 4 years, if properly resourced, not only with the equipment itself, but also the sustainment, where the National Guard could provide that capability to our nation in a non-federalized status.
Well, again, I would hope the subcommittee looks at that seriously, Mr. Chairman. It actually fits with a lot of the concerns that you've expressed in a variety of ways. I think it's an excellent proposal. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Mr. Kilmer.
Thank you, Chairman, and thanks for being with us. General Hokanson, there have been several recent reports by leading think tanks outlining the need for increased air refueling capabilities. And without this refueling capacity, experts think the Air Force would struggle in a conflict against adversaries like Russia and China. Despite that acute need, the Air Force still operates several Air National Guard units as classic associate units without assigned KC-135s, including the 141st Air Refueling Wing at Fairchild Air Force Base on the other side of my state in Spokane. So as the Air Force brings more KC-46s into service, should we explore realigning KC-135s to the Air National Guard units like the 141st to fill this refueling capacity gap? And maybe if you could just speak to how would this increased capability assist our global refueling mission?
Yes, sir, and thank you. And when we look at the total tanker fleet, I know this is really important not only to Transcom but Strategic Command as well, and the Air Force. And as highlighted earlier by General Scobie, our ability to project power is really one of the great advances that the United States military has. And so we're going to need to maintain the right capability and capacity when it comes to area refuelers. And for us, it's finding that balance as we field the new KC-46, but also retaining enough of the KC-135 so that we can meet all of those requirements. And so we will continue to advocate for each of our flying squadrons within the Air National Guard to maintain the capability and capacity our nation needs, whether that is in the KC-135 or hopefully in the KC-46 or potentially the next generation of aerial tanker. But the key there is when we look at that is to make sure that we have the ability to sustain and operate and maintain those aircraft. So anytime we allocate them, we just have to make sure we have the appropriate funding associated with it.
Appreciate that. I also want to just touch briefly on, I know Congressman Cole and Chair Ruppersberger raised issues related to cyber. Obviously there's concern in most of our communities around just attacks on critical infrastructure, whether it be power grids or energy pipelines or water utilities, which could really cripple access to some of the necessities that we rely on, whether it be electricity or water. In our neck of the woods, we have the 252nd Cyber Operations Group. I know there are several units that are focused on countering these sorts of cyber threats, and with a particular focus on safeguarding critical infrastructure. Any direction to us, anything Congress can do to support the National Guard in carrying out and potentially expanding that type of important mission of safeguarding our critical infrastructure?
Well, sir, that's a great question. And when we look at the importance of our critical infrastructure and really the resilience of it, I think the continued investment in cyber forces in the National Guard is really important to our nation for a multitude of reasons. Obviously, under Title 10 in support of Cybercom and Northcom to defend really all of our assets. But then one area that we often overlook, which we've really tried to emphasize lately, is our state partners. Many of them ask for additional cyber help as well to help defend their networks and to help make their critical infrastructure more resilient. And then if you bring that even here closer to home, where if we have this capability in the National Guard, not only can they do their state partnership and their federal mission, but they also in a state active duty status can help mitigate some of the cyber attacks that we see on our school districts and counties and other state locations. And one thing that we did earlier this year is I actually reached out to all of our adjutants general to have them identify the 10 most critical infrastructures within their state that we really needed to focus our resiliency on. And in many cases, those are cyber related work that they can do to help, basically get with those agencies or organizations to test the vulnerability of their systems to make sure that they're resilient. Because in that way, we can hopefully deny what any adversary might want to do to impact our homeland.
Thanks very much. I don't have enough time to get another question in, so I yield back. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Adderholt. Mr. Adderholt going once, going twice. Mr. Carter from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and General Hokusson. We've heard a lot about Army modernization efforts over the past 2 or 3 years. Good news is, according to the Chief of Staff of the Army, 24 of the Army's signature modernization programs will be in the hands of soldiers in 2023. Does that include the Army National Guard? Which of the Army signature modernization programs will have the greatest impact on the Guard? And do you believe that the Guard has been given sufficient opportunity to provide input into the requirement process of Army modernization?
And sir, thank you for that question. And when we look at Army Futures Command, which is there in Austin, we have 20 guardsmen that are there full-time to help make sure that the Guard is part of that conversation. And when we look at the modernization process, I've got an extremely good relationship with General McConville and the Secretary of the Army, and they have included the National Guard in all of those modernization plans. And when you talk about specific systems, I would say 3 to highlight is future vertical lift. I know whenever that decision is made, the National Guard will be part of the initial fielding of some of the first units out there. We're also working very closely with the multi-domain task forces so that once that is developed, that the National Guard will be included to develop one of those units as well. And then also when we look at the 8 National Guard divisions, obviously the 36 is there in Texas, is to make sure that they are modernized so that they look exactly like their active duty, their active duty counterparts. So if they're ever needed, they would basically almost be a 1-for-1 fill. And the bottom line, sir, is, as you know, the National Guard has got to look exactly like the Army National Guard and the Air National Guard so that we can be utilized whenever our nation needs us.
And you have been in many fights hand in hand with our regular Army and performed an excellent performance. We are very, very proud of our National Guard in Texas. And that T-patch means a lot to us. Another question that gets the heart of our people in Texas is the role of the National Guard on the border. Would you like to make a comment about what you've seen in support of our border operations and what you see that we could do from the experience of our guardsmen to make it better? I, for one, know it's a big political issue to send the Guard, but I believe they're capable better than probably most anybody down there, except maybe the Border Patrol. And I wanted to love to see you be given strength in your performance on the border. Would you like to comment?
Yes, sir. So when you look at the National Guard support on the border right now, we've got about 2,400 guardsmen under Title 10 working for U.S. Northern Command, and that mission is scheduled to end in the 1st of October. But we know DHS has put in a request to go beyond that. We're in the phase right now of negotiating what that force structure will look like and what mission sets that they'll be asked to provide. Right now, they provide a lot of surveillance. They also provide aviation support and logistics support to CBP along the border. Then we also have Operation Lone Star, which I would really have to defer to the state of Texas for those personnel that are working under command and control of the governor of Texas there. But when we look at long term, sir, I think this is really a CBP mission. And I know the Guard is there to help fill in the gap. But I think there may be some technical or technological solutions to help there that would reduce the manpower request or potentially hire more law enforcement to be there. But obviously, until we get to that point, the Guard will be there to support in any way that we can.
Well, it's clearly Homeland Security issue, but the thing we have to worry about is the overflow that is causing to shut down our operational people at the border, and that it's only going to get worse. Thank you for the Guard's participation. Operation Lone Star, we're very proud of it, and you guys are back. You got our backs, and we appreciate it. I've run out of time. Yield back.
Thank you, sir.
Now, Congresswoman Sherry Bustos from the state of Illinois and a graduate from the University of Maryland.
Thank you to my fellow TERP, Congressman Ruppersberger. I appreciate that. General Hokanson, thanks for your service and your leadership. I'm going to direct my questions to you, and thank you to the other panelists also for your service. We greatly appreciate it. General Hokanson, since the start of the Russian invasion, I'm going to focus a little bit, be parochial here, but the Illinois National Guard has provided hundreds of thousands of dollars and literally tons of critical medical supplies, ambulance support, humanitarian goods for the people of Ukraine. And the Illinois Guard has also continued to maintain a 3-decade-old state partnership program and security cooperation with Poland, which really we've seen that it's proven to be critical to global security today. So, General, I wanted to get your perspective on the capacity challenges the National Guard may be facing with everything that they're being asked to do, responding to COVID-19, our domestic disaster responses, the crisis in Ukraine, just, to name a few. But how is the National Guard holding up? Are there any missions that have had to be put on hold to handle these high priority cases? If you can kind of just give us a lay of the land.
Yes, ma'am, and thank you. And that's a very, very important question. When we look at our guardsmen and their ability, and frankly, all reservists, to balance their civilian career, their military career, and their family. And we have asked a lot of them, not only over the past 20 years, but especially over the last 2 years. And obviously the crisis in Ukraine is also even bringing that more to light. And fortunately, what I'm finding is everywhere I go, everybody said, look, we love what we're doing. And we have historically high retention rates. And so our guardsmen, they're voting by staying in, that they like their ability to not only help out in their communities, but help out internationally and to deploy. And when you look at all that we've asked our guardsmen to do over the last 2 years, particularly related to COVID, civil disturbances, and deployments, there's not a single mission that we missed. And when a certain state needed additional capacity, other states volunteered, or through the Emergency Management Assistance Compact, they came to their help for anything that they needed. And so when I look at that, I think we're in a really good spot. Now, there are certain areas where we really have to rely on our first level leaders to work with their soldiers and airmen and their families to find that right balance for those that may be in a critical area. But I think we've been able to balance that really well. And a lot of that goes back to the funding that we receive. And really the expectation of our guardsmen when they come in today, they expect to deploy. They expect to help out in their communities. And we've been very fortunate that our employers support that as well. So we do keep a close pulse on it, ma'am, and thank you for asking. But we're still in a really good place right now.
Thank you, General. And obviously, as you talked about in your opening statements with your mantra, always ready, always there, this is all playing out. You know how important, I'm going to switch gears a little bit, but you know how important the 182nd Airlift Wing in Peoria, Illinois is to your overall operation, and obviously to us here in Illinois, to we here in Illinois. But they have consistently maintained the highest mission capability rate in the Air National Guard, and the C-130 community has been recognized for winning their 10th Outstanding Unit Award. So we're very, very proud of that. Thanks to you, to General Brown, to General Scobie, we've made significant progress to keep our C-130 units going. And as they continue to face the challenges and the need for continued investments in modernization, if you could weigh in first, and if we have time, General Scobie can also maybe weigh in on this, but how does the Guard plan to address this in the coming years, the challenges and the need for continued investment in modernization?
Yes, ma'am. And when you look at our C-130 fleet, as we have seen every year, not only internationally, but domestically, the importance of that capability to provide airlift into almost any environment is something that we absolutely have to retain. And so when we look at the C-130Js, obviously that's where we would like to get to eventually. But between now and then, everything we can do to upgrade our H models with the newer engines, the intercontrol fuel system, the mission package, and as well as the propellers, things like that, we look to extend the life of the current airframes out to 2040, which gives us more time to replace those H models with J models. But also it's really trying to find that balance as we modernize our fighter fleet as well, with only a set number of resources, trying to put our investments where they're the most critical, But in this case, we want to retain that capability any way that we can and make sure that it's modernized and relevant.
General Scobie, we can maybe follow up offline because my time's expired and I want to be respectful of my colleagues. With that, I yield back, Mr. Ruppersberger. Thank you so much.
We're going to check with staff right now on availability of witnesses for a second round. So after Ms. Kirkpatrick asks her questions, we'll then make a decision whether we have a second round. Okay, Ms. Kirkpatrick.
Thank you. And thank you for having this hearing. I really appreciate it. General Hokanson, the 162nd Air National Guard Wing at Morris Air National Guard Base in Tucson is a vital part of our community here. The base is home to multiple F-16 squadrons, and last year we began hearing about potential plans to shut down a training squadron at the base. I'm concerned about this because they provide training not only to US pilots, but to allies and partner nations. These international partners pay the Air Force for the training, instructors, and use of the aircraft. The training squadron pays for itself while improving our relationships around the world. Well, it sounds like this plan may have been part of a budgeting drill. I want to stress the unique mission set of the training squadron at the 162nd and ensure the National Guard and Air Force are properly accounting for the broader impact of a decision this would have. General Hokanson, can you comment on the importance of these international partnerships and how our support makes our own homeland safer?
Yes, ma'am. And to go back to my earlier comment about the fact we have 25 fighter squadrons in the Air National Guard, and I think our nation really needs that capability and capacity to continue all 25 of our fighter squadrons. And as you highlight, the training that goes with our allies and partners there in Tucson is really important, particularly as a lot of those countries that we try to get to buy US equipment so we're interoperable on the battlefield. And I know a lot of countries are buying the F-16s. And so to me, we'll work very closely with the Air Force. I know it's an Air Force decision, but we will continue to advocate for really the capability, capacity they provide, but also the importance to our allies and partners as a lot of those look at where they're purchasing their future military material, and that the US and the F-16 is a very important option to each and every one of them.
Thank you. I really appreciate your answer. My next question is for Lieutenant General Daniels. My district is home to Fort Huachuca and the Army Intelligence Center of Excellence. The Intelligence Center of Excellence plays a critical role in providing training to our military intelligence professionals and also has a significant positive impact locally, recently celebrating its 50th anniversary at the fort. Lieutenant General Daniels, can you discuss the Army Reserve's intelligence capabilities within the total Army and the essential role it has in the United States domestic and global security operations?
So thank you very much for that question. The Army Reserve's intelligence capabilities are linked in very tightly with our intel community partners, as well as our active duty counterparts. We have a number of different units that align with our active duty counterparts and work with them on a regular basis around all of our geographic combatant commands. There's an incredible relationship between them. They have a long history of working well together and mastering their skills together, going to war together. So we have a really strong relationship with the active component as well as the intelligence community, supporting all of the different agencies with lots of strategic intelligence capability. It's rather robust. And in fact, we have some folks that are currently doing mission in support of the Ukraine effort right now that have sort of turned from what they were doing and are assisting on that effort. We've got quite a few folks. We've got about 113 personnel right now who are helping out in a part-time capacity and in some cases full-time activations to help out with that mission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My time's almost up, so I'm going to yield back. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go to a second round, 3 minute per question. I will start then with Mr. Calvert and we'll go down the line. Okay, General.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Oh, yeah, you just came in.
I did.
Would you like to take over?
No, I don't want to take over. I just want to ask
Okay.
my question.
Okay. Mr. Ryan.
Yeah, I have a question. Thank you,
He wants
Mr.
to go to the
Chairman.
Senate.
I appreciate the opportunity. I just have a question I want to ask General Scobie. As you know, General, Youngstown Air Reserve Station maintains the 910th Air Wing, which we've talked about a number of times over the years. And let me just say first, thank you for your service to the country. You're one of my absolute favorites over my 20 years here in Congress that I've had to work with. And so yeah, you're going to be missed. But you know, we've talked about the aerial spray mission, and I want to thank you for your support in recognizing the importance of the Reserve Special Mission Units and your steadfast support in seeking to get new C-130J models to these units that need them. I'm also grateful to Chair McCollum and her staff for their diligence and understanding throughout the few years that we've been working on this to help these units upgrade from the H models to the J models. But I did want to note a couple of things as the Air Force and the Reserve work together to finish the basing study that will ultimately determine where these planes go. Firstly, the subcommittee has twice passed report language to the Air Force Reserve that was written with these C-130Js in mind. Both the fiscal year 16 and fiscal year 17 HACD report state in nearly identical language, quote, the Air Force Reserve includes units that have a designated specialized mission, and as well as a traditional tactical mission. And the committee encourages the Chief of the Air Force Reserve to review the requirements to ensure that specialized units are allocated equipment, upgrades necessary to address safety concern associated with these missions. And of course, end quote, and of course, you yourself have repeatedly stated to the subcommittee that this is your intention to base any C-130Js at one of the specialty mission units. So point number two is quickly, under the prior administration, this basing study was already delayed once. It was put on hold after site visits had already been completed at the aerial spray unit in Youngstown and the firefighting unit in Peterson, Colorado. So I want to express my strong desire for the Air Force to use the work that has already been done and been completed and finish this basing study in the most expeditious manner possible. General Scobie, can you continue to advocate for this on behalf of YARS so that the Air Force completes a basing study adhering to the standards laid out by this subcommittee and executes the study as expeditiously as possible so that our pilots are not forced to fly older, less safe aircraft any longer than they have to?
Yes. Congressman Ryan, thanks for that, the introduction to what we're talking about. You absolutely have my commitment to do that, and spent time with the Secretary of the Air Force talking about the same. Our special missions, as you know, are so important to what we do in the Air Force Reserve. These are missions that uniquely are designed to protect what's most dearest to that, and that's the American people. Whether it's fire, whether it's spray, they become incredibly important. And so I'm committed to make sure that the work that we've done in the past informs decisions as we go forward. It has always been my intent to prioritize those special missions as we go forward. And I would expect in June or early July that we'll start moving down this process in an expeditious manner. And you have my confirmation that we're going to work with the Air Force and the Secretary to ensure that happens.
Great. Thank you, General. Again, thank you for your service, and we appreciate you. And hopefully we can catch up here before you move on. But thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
Congressman.
Okay, we're going to go to the second round now, 3 minutes, and I'm going to start. General Daniels, as Secretary Warmoth and General McConville mentioned in our Army hearing last week, there will continue to be a huge demand for cybersecurity professionals in the Army of the future. Clearly, the Army Reserves will continue to be a huge attraction for many who work in the private sector but want to contribute to the national mission set. Can you talk about your current recruitment and retention of cyber professionals and how the adjustments in end strength will affect the reserves? Additionally, can you provide the subcommittee some insights on the contributions in the cyber domain on your reserve soldiers?
Yes, and thank you for that, that question. The Army Reserve is doing incredibly well in terms of building up our cyber protection teams. We represent about 25% of the total Army force in terms of cyber protection and cyber capabilities. We have 10 teams, of which that are authorized. 6 are already at full operational capability. The other 4 are going to be fielded ahead of schedule. So we're not having too much challenge recruiting on that front. And in fact, we're looking at, building out an additional Army Reserve Cyber Brigade. That is something that they're looking for future force structure. We're having discussions about whether and what the timing of that and how we do it so that we don't build it all in one shot, but we so we can get folks through the training pipeline in a rational manner. We are, just like the National Guard, looking at those folks who are transitioning off of active duty and whether or not they would like to continue doing that great cyber mission in the reserve, as well as holding down their civilian positions. So we've had some good success on that front. And then the Army is also commencing with some JROTC cyber-focused pilot schools to additionally gain propensity for military service as well as the cyber career field. So that has just kicked off recently, and we will continue to look into that and how we can leverage those personnel in future years.
Thank you. And we don't have a lot of time, 52 seconds, but would any of the other reserve chiefs, Admiral Mustin, Generals Bellin and Scobie, would like to add to those comments?
I will jump in and just say that I echo the sentiments of General Hoganson and Lieutenant General Daniels. You know, we continue to seek cyber expertise, both in and out of uniform, and we recognize that the significant training that has gone into our active duty sailors is a tremendous benefit to the reserve community. So having the mechanisms in place for us to create a landing spot for them is of utmost importance, and we're working with our Navy Recruiting Command specifically to ensure that that happens.
Thank you. Finished by the bell. I yield back. I yield to Mr. Carter. No, Calvert.
Okay, Dutch. Thank you. Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. I was happy that Judge Carter did bring up the border issue. Obviously, that's a tremendous challenge to those of us in border states, and I want to thank the Guard for the work that they've done so far and the work they're hopefully going to do in the future to protect the country. And I suspect we're going to may have in the next few days significant challenges on the border. The issue, the other thing I wanted to bring up, General Hokanson, was, and maybe for everyone on this panel, is recruitment and retention. Do we have a technical problem? Anyway, recruitment and retention.
Mr. Hoganson needs to mute.
Yes, sir, I'm good. Go ahead.
We okay now?
He is. But go ahead.
Okay. Coming out of this pandemic, obviously, been a lot of stress on the force, and I am wondering how is our recruitment and retention going on, both in the Guard and the Reserve, for all the people. First, General Hokanson, and maybe the rest of the panel.
Okay. Can you hear me okay, sir, this time? All right, can we hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, great, thank you. So we look at the National Guard and recruiting across the nation. When we look at last year, we were very fortunate. We met our recruiting goals on both the Army and the Air Guard and the Army earlier than we had previously. But as we go forward, we do face many challenges with the economic environment, the need for companies to hire employees. They're adding a lot of benefits and incentives that they previously hadn't, that we really relied on, like such as educational benefits. And so it is a tough environment. The other thing we're finding is having been in a COVID environment for 2 years. Now we're starting to get back to the face-to-face ability to recruit. And some of our recruiters actually haven't been in that environment. And then when you add that, the process to get in has reduced the number of people that are eligible due to a multitude of factors, both physical or background checks and things like that. But we're also seeing a lower propensity to serve. And so that pool of eligible candidates continues to get smaller and the competition for them becomes greater. But we have been fortunate, our recruiters and our recruiting teams are working really hard to meet that requirement. And the summer months are usually our biggest recruiting months. So we think probably June, July, we'll know how we're looking for the end of the year, but we're in a fairly good place right now. But we won't know until probably August or September what that's going to look like for the year.
Thank you.
Mr. Kilmer, and by the way, we are having problems with the general's communication, but we can hear him. So I think we ought to move forward. Ms. Bustos. Mr. Kirkpatrick. And Mr. Carter. Cole, back to Cole. You're still there, Mr. Cole?
I am indeed. Mr.
Good to
Chairman.
see you here.
Well, I'm
Okay.
delighted to be here. I've got a question really for General Scobie. Number one, I just want to echo what our colleague from Ohio, Mr. Ryan, said. We're going to miss you, General. You've done a fantastic job for the country, and just appreciate all the hard work. And we've talked a little bit about the importance of some of the Air Guards units, everything from fighters to tankers to transport. We don't talk very much about special operations units. I have one just outside my district, the 137 Special Operations Unit, MC-12s, that do really valuable work on ISRs or ISR. So I'm curious as to, number one, how the contribution you think those units make, and two, what sort of future do you see for them going forward?
Hey, Congressman Cole, thanks very much for the question. Our Special Operations Organization, whether they're Guard and Reserve, we work in tandem a lot with, especially what the Air Force's Special Operations Command does. And the three components work together to solve those. There is always going to be a place for those organizations within our commands. And particularly it's because these are unique capabilities and unique individuals, for that matter, that have trained to a really high degree. It takes a lot of treasure of the U.S. People in order to train them, but it's also, how do you find special people like this? And so I'll have to dovetail into what General Hokanson said. It is really about how we retain those individuals. Once we have them in our organization, are we creating that place where they can serve to the fullest of their capability? And that is what we've been trying to do. And so whether it's in rescue, whether it's in special missions, MC-12s, or any of our other special operations missions that we're in across the entire spectrum that the Air Force is doing right now, it's really important that we retain that talent.
Well, thank you for that. And again, wish you well in your retirement. We regret losing you.
Carter,
Yeah.
if he's here.
Mr. Carter? Is Rip Carter? John Carter?
The judge left. He had to leave at 1 o'clock.
Oh, he did. Okay. I'm going to turn to you to close, Mr. Calvert.
All I want to say is, everyone, General Scobie, we're going to miss you. It's been great working with you over the years, and I'm sure you'll do wonderful in retirement. I hope I see you around. Maybe visit California now and then. But with that, Mr. Chairman, thank the panel and appreciate it. And I yield back.
Acknowledge your service and your leadership and your competence, and you're going to be a role model for those to follow you. Secondly, all the other witnesses who were here, we also respect you, your leadership skills, and as we move forward in these very dangerous times. And I thank you for coming here today. It was a good hearing, and We learned what we need to learn to do our jobs to help support you. So unless there's no objection, I close this meeting. Adjourned.